Hello, everybody. I hope that everyone can see us. Can I just get a raise of the hands if you can all see us in here? Look at this. Hundreds of people raising their hands. All right, great to see you all. My name's Greg Rowan. I'm a content manager at Unleashed Software, and we are today kicking off our business summit series. Lucky enough to have two very, very experienced brewing industry people with us today, Maria and Simon. I will ask you to introduce yourselves if I can, starting with Maria.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Maria Piermann, and I'm a CPA, so I'm an accountant, and I specialize in beverage alcohol. I live in Bend, Oregon in the US, so I'm just north of California. And I've built a practice where I specialize particularly with breweries and distilleries, and we'll get into this topic in a sec, but that category is also starting to splinter a bit so that there's other beverages included in that. But that's where I spend all of my time. And I usually function as a contract CFO for these companies. I've written a book called Small Brewery Finance that was published by the Brewers Association here in the US a couple years ago, working on one for distilleries now, but really passionate about the business side of the industry for beverage alcohol.
All right, thank you. I just took that as has forgotten more about the brewing industry than any of us will ever know. We're really lucky to have you here. Thank you. And fresh from no doubt his vats, wiping the brewer's yeast off his clothes to join us. Tell us about yourself, Simon.
Yeah, hey team. So my name is Simon Watson. I am one of the founders and owners of Urbanaut Brewing here in Kingsland, Auckland, NZ, for all our international guests, I guess. So Urbanaut, we're pretty young. So we're about to have our fourth birthday this week. I'm pretty excited about that, and it's been a crazy ride. So, geez, it's been a full-on 4 years, and yeah, I wish maybe I'd met you, Maria, earlier, but I'm sure you could have been a big help to us. But yeah, it's exciting times, and excited to be part of this. So yeah, cheers.
Great. Yeah, you're definitely Urbanaut was. From my experience as an outsider, as a consumer, you were sort of one of the first and most recognizable craft beers to kind of crop up on my radar, and sort of in that bottle shop space where I encounter craft beers, you've sort of came in relatively early, I guess, and have stuck around, which is a thing, I think. It's an achievement in itself.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure. There's a lot of great beer here in NZ, and yeah, you're constantly working to keep your spot on the shelf. That's cool.
Well, it's obviously a very fast-moving, quite dynamic space. I mean, that's part of the excitement and kind of part of the point of the craft beer industry, which has made it a lot of fun to be in, and added a bit of interest to the alcohol industry. But I guess also brings challenges. And I think one of the really useful things about having you here in particular, Maria, is you sort of saw the birth of the craft beer industry in Portland. How many years ago now, would you say?
It really started in 1985. Yeah,
wow, really?
That's when it really started. Yeah, 1985, that's when some of the originals got going, Widmer Brewing, for example, and some other, heritage craft players. But there was a bit of a lull, and then it kind of started to make a resurgence again in 2006, I would say, was the most recent wave. And in 2006, starting that year, we were seeing craft beverage numbers of revenue growth that was like 13% revenue growth year over year nationwide.
Wow.
And so that has certainly matured and evened out a bit. Right now, nationwide, the growth rate is between 3 and 3.5% annually. So, you know, if you look back over the last 15 years, there really has been a huge maturation of the industry. And we have now somewhere between 9 and 10,000 licensed breweries in the US. And at that time in 2006-ish, and I'm pulling this out of my head, but I think it was more like 3,000. So it's quite a difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's sort of, I mean, the topic today is trends, opportunities, and threats. And I think the trends and the threats kind of go together in a way, because, I mean, you in the US, you're sort of ahead of the curve of where we are in Australasia. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 10 years. But I remember the last time we caught up, you were, you know, saying things about, you know, expect to see sour beers coming along, and everyone was, oh, no one will drink sour fruity lagers. And it was like, oh crikey. So with that in mind, you know, what's happening at the moment? Is it that lowering revenue? Is it are margins shrinking?
Yeah, it's definitely turned towards being a fight for minimizing expenses. So when you think about the financial outcome of these companies, we also have limited shelf space. When you walk into the grocery store, there's only so many square feet available for beverage alcohol. And then the number of brands and the number of SKUs within each brand continues to grow as well. And you are fighting for the shelf space, and you end up at a bit of a price ceiling because there's only so much that the consumer is willing to pay. And so then it becomes really a fight over how you can control your costs, because you've reached a ceiling with your revenue. The COGS are fairly stable, except for we actually have experienced a lot of volatility over the last year and a half, especially in regards to cans. But definitely there can be some stressors in the COGS environment. But taking that anomaly out of the equation, generally your revenue will flatten out and become more stable. The COGS will become more stable. And then when it comes to returning value to your stakeholders or your shareholders, it's about how well you can minimize those costs and you know, maximize the operating efficiencies. So a lot of businesses will end up in a place where they're maxing out on their production capacity, and they really have to get creative in that space between maxing out on their current facility or, you know, biting the bullet and spending a ton of money to build a brand new facility. You know, they're not quite bullish enough to take that leap on the new facility, but they need to do something to get out of their current capacity crunch. And so there comes, you know, a point where there's a lot of creativity that comes into it. And we're seeing a lot of businesses breweries start to form cooperatives. So, you know, your neighbor might have excess capacity in the production facility, and you might be in a position where you're running out of space. So you join forces, and maybe there's an alternating proprietorship. So it's the laws and the regulations around beverage alcohol in the US are certainly different than they are in Australia, New Zealand. And so in the US, every bonded brewer, which is a licensed brewer, has to manufacture their goods in a particular bonded area. And right. There are arrangements that you can make, one of which is called an alternating proprietorship. And alternating proprietorship allows, you know, if I'm running out of space and Simon's got excess capacity, I can come in, brew on his system, and I basically like rent the license or rent the bond, so to speak, for the period that I'm there producing. But the point of all this is that we're entering a phase where you're really having to fight for getting sharper with your business decisions and having better data available to make good decisions. So, and all of this is, you know, normal stuff that mature industries go through. Yep. But it has been a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of people who are in the brewing industry, because you know, if this is where you started your career 10 or 15 years ago, and it's been easy up until now, you know, to make a profit, and then you're facing the reality of this maturing industry, it can be challenging to say the least. And we're seeing some shakeout in terms of breweries folding or grasping at other products to make up some of that margin. So,
I mean, the exciting, fun, not that it's not going to be exciting in future, but I feel like the easy ride might be sort of starting to slow down a little. So now you promised me, I can't remember if I gave you homework or not, but you said that you had actually been advising a lot of people on just strategies for minimizing their costs within their businesses. So I might, if that's okay, I'll hit you up for that at the end of the session. But Simon, are you experiencing any of this on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, how good is Maria? Like, seriously, get over to New Zealand. We could use your help, no doubt. Pretty much, you've just nailed it. Exactly what Urbanaut is going through. So we've had 4 years of really good growth, and during that time, we're buying tanks and more tanks all the time, and just, I guess, trying to keep up. And it's been great. We may have in the past and do a little bit of contract here. So kind of, Maria, you were sort of touching on that, being able to have other people come in and with any surplus capacity, we offer that up. We're at a point where we have very little to no capacity available, and struggle to meet our own demands. And so we're having those conversations now about, do we find another site where we can make much greater volumes and look at much larger brew houses and things like this. And yeah, it's scary. It's interesting hearing what you have to say about what's happening.
If you could just give some reassurance about Simon's future cash flow, and then he can just make those decisions with confidence, it'll be all fine. Yeah.
I guess on the other side of things, it's also, I mean, it's massively exciting, right? You start to see your product that you formed 4 years ago from nothing being, we send it all around the world now, and it's amazing. It's very exciting. So it's kind of hard to slow that. You've got those opportunities in front of you. You want to take them on, but yeah, it's interesting to see what's happening in the US for sure.
Is there a risk of just becoming an inefficient big box brewer? If you're starting to address some of these issues and you're like, well, let's get more efficient. Let's up our rate of production. Let's up our scale and make all those decisions that the big box brewers have made. And then suddenly are you just a small, inefficient competitor who gets gobbled up? Because I mean, at the flip side of this, what you guys have made your name on is innovation. And I can go and buy my favorite beers, Kingsland. Thank you very much. And the Brixton Pale Ale. That's good. But if I really want to be at the coalface of the craft beer scene, I'll go to one of your bars. Well, not one of your bars, but and a bar that serves your kind of constantly refreshed range. Is there a tension between the efficiencies that you're going to have to chase and keeping that freshness in the market?
I got people going into the office. So yeah, that's a real interesting thing for Urbanaut. So when we started out, I think we launched with maybe 6 core range beers, and we've moved now to we have maybe a core range of 6 beers, but the vast majority of the beer we make is special release beer, and so typically it'll be brewed once, maybe twice, and then it's not done again. Some of it will perhaps be seasonal, but people are looking for new and different styles of beer, particularly from Urbanaut, and so that's where we've given ourselves that license to innovate and to do different things, and fortunately now people are willing to take a punt on trying a new and different Urbanaut beer, and that's part of the excitement, I guess. But your point about if you were producing the same, I think, core range beers, and then you're trying to get more and more efficient and tighter and tighter, then I think maybe you do run the risk of, getting gobbled up or whatever else. I don't know if that's what you've seen in the States, Maria, but for us, we need to be doing something different, and give people a reason to grab that can of Urbanaut off the shelf.
Can I ask a silly question? Your short run once-off beers, are they in the keg or the can or both?
Typically both, yeah.
And how do you sell the can? Because I don't see them. I'm not in the cool places. Where am I? Are you selling them direct to consumer?
A little bit of direct to consumer, but pretty much to retail. And to supermarkets here in NZ, they and bottle stores. So and then to export for cans in particular. So far and wide.
So Maria, how do we solve a problem like Simon?
Well, I like to think of the beers that you offer as an investment portfolio. You've got stocks and bonds, and so your flagships, you might have 2 or 3 flagships that are going to be your bonds, and they're available year round. They're available constantly. And then within your rotators, those are your stocks. And so within your stocks, you can have things like, small cap stocks, large cap stocks. You might have some international funds. You might have some blue chips, et cetera. And so those might be the different styles. And then you just sort of make a mixed portfolio, but you do have to be nimble enough to change up and listen to the market and keep an ear to the ground with what the market's telling you. But at the end of the day, it is about having a balanced portfolio of offerings that, you might have a specialty in barrel aged beers or sour beers, but you don't want to have 3 or 4 of those on offer at any time. So you want to, make sure that they're spread out and sprinkled through the market appropriately. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're hitting the mark with those flagships, because that will be the bread and butter. So in terms of like scaling up and being efficient, I think it's a good idea to bet big and bet strong on 1 or 2 brands, but make sure that the ship that you're building still is nimble enough to change directions when it needs to. And I can't overemphasize the point of listening to the market and being attuned to what the consumer is clamoring for. And you can, as a business owner, get sort of carried away with what the beer nerds are talking about or what the beer snobs want. You could kind of get wrapped up in that. And it's important to be attuned to that, but you got to have 1 foot in the beer snob community and 1 foot in the everyman drinker, and be able to balance that and keep the everyman happy while also giving the beer snob something to talk about, because they're the taste makers and the trend makers. So it's a big balance, So, but yeah, I just kind of come back to that idea of the portfolio and trying to just think about, okay, am I carefully balanced, and how am I planning this out?
And presumably today's or yesterday's weird sour lager will be, tomorrow's regular boring offering, or it's going to be boring. I'm sorry. It's going to be your bread and butter.
Yeah.
Just a little bit conscious of time. Can I pick your brain, Maria, on trends and outside of beer, just in the general brewing and/or alcohol industry. And while you speak, I'm going to distract you with unprofessionally checking my power cable because I have an anxiety. So fire away. I will be listening.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sure. So, we're seeing a ton of innovation, and particularly in terms of new products, there's two big trends that we're experiencing right now. One is hard seltzer, and the other is non-alcoholic beer. And hard seltzer, I realize might be an unusual term, or maybe the audience hasn't heard of it, but you will hear of it soon. And so Greg and I were talking earlier, like last week or so, and Greg was unfamiliar with it. And then so I went on and I was researching, and I was trying to figure out, I actually Googled, what do Australians call hard seltzer? I guess there's not a term, but Simon, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how would you describe it?
I guess we would call that spirits-based seltzers, what you're referring to, and I imagine maybe things like White Claw, I guess, in the States are blowing up.
Right, White Claw and Truly, yeah.
Yeah, so we're fully aware of them here. The challenge for seltzers here in New Zealand is, in particular, I don't know what the rule is in Australia, but in supermarket or in grocery, we're allowed to sell seltzers providing they're on a beer base, not on a spirit base.
Right, yeah.
So we have had a number of breweries start making beer-based seltzers and selling them in grocery, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess at this point, that I don't think I'd be talking out of turn. They haven't hit the same popularity that the spirit-based ones have yet.
Yeah, right.
But that may change. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually opposite in the U.S. And we call it fermented malt beverage. So the fermented FMBs, fermented malt beverage, so the malt-based seltzers as opposed to spirits-based seltzers. Yeah. I would say those are more popular than the spirits-based seltzers.
Really?
Oh yeah. And boy, I mean, just in the last 2, maybe 3 years, the last 3 years, they have just soared. And so there's still decent growth in the craft malted beverage category. But a lot of that, I mean, even though the segment is very small, the growth rate is just phenomenal for hard seltzer. So that's one trend that's coming along. And then also the non-alcoholic trend. Dry January is a thing, but this is beyond dry January. This is turning into a lifestyle choice for a lot of people. So it's interesting, to see how producers are pivoting and taking advantage, because the way that you produce both hard seltzer and NA beer, it's very similar to making regular beer. So you don't have to buy any special equipment as a producer. It's kind of really the only big change you have to make is changing your mental idea about, is this something I feel comfortable making? Because a lot of purists say not gonna mess with seltzer because that's not it's not craft beer. So it just depends on what your appetite is for change.
Yeah,
who drinks hard seltzer? Now I have a picture in my head of the spirits-based hard seltzer drinker, and it's probably just influenced by the branding on the cans that I've seen. It's very kind of youth oriented, quite a fresh kind of message coming through, light flavors, that sort of thing. But from hearing you, Simon, talking about the beer based, how did you describe them, Maria? How are they referred to?
Fermented malt beverage.
Yeah, right. So what kind of flavor profile are we talking here, and who likes to drink them? Is it your craft beer drinkers, or is it your sort of cool people in white tennis shoes? Or
I think at the moment what the brewers are trying to do is recreate that taste and taste profile of the spirit-based seltzers out of beer, or out of fermented malt, as I think, Maria, is the term that you're using. And yeah, and that's the challenge, is to try and change that. So I think that they're kind of, in New Zealand, similar drinker. The difference being that I've just gone and got my groceries, and now I can pick up a 6-pack of seltzer. And whereas that, was never been an option before, having something different. It was in the supermarket, it was beer, or it was wine, or it was cider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you're going for a sort of Smirnoff Ice style, RTD, as we call them, ready to drink,
yeah.
That's a bottle store thing, and it's also sort of perceived as a teen drinker thing, or maybe that's a media perception.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, seltzers they're a lot cleaner drink than your Smirnoff RTD type situation. So they're typically low in sugar, and I guess a bit more refreshing. I would have. Well, what do you say? Yeah.
Yeah, less sugary. It's interesting, the population that drinks them in the States. I've been very surprised. And I think when they first hit the market, it was primarily much, particularly younger demo. So, 18 to 34 might drink a beverage like this. But now, like I'd say over the past year, it's really opened up. I just had a conversation with somebody on Friday he's probably 55, and he referenced, drinking a hard seltzer. So, and he's kind of upper level in terms of the socioeconomic scale. So kind of upper socioeconomic, 55 years old, professional, so it's not exactly who you think that it would be. But one of the things that I think hard seltzer has going for it is that there's a perception in the consumer's mind that it's a healthier product, which it's not.
Sure.
But because, it does have, it's not quite as cloying or sugary in terms of its taste as the Smirnoff Ice is, or, something like that. But it does feel more like carbonated water with a kick and a little bit of flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simon, do you brew any non-alcoholic beer or any?
No, we don't at this stage.
Quite the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all beer and cider. We make a little bit of cider. We're at the point where we kind of can't keep up with the beer at the moment, so it's challenging to sort of devote tanks to something different. But we have played around a little bit with the 0% beer, and that's something that we want to look at, probably more so than seltzers for us. So yeah, we definitely see some real opportunity in that space. It's hard to make 0% beers, man.
I was going to say, silly question, but how do you stop the alcohol forming?
Yeah, well,
out afterwards, or?
Yeah. There's different ways of doing it, and so, but then how do you do it and then still make it taste like a beer, but and not taste really thin is the challenge. So
yeah. That was my fear. I've had as a consumer, I've had my first moment of going, name no names, but Rob, drinking a 0% beer on a hot afternoon while camping, and it was just like, is there a point? Does it taste okay? Is it refreshing? And he, hands one over, and it's like, good God, that's delicious. And I start to see the point. But yeah, there's been a few duds along the way. That watery flavor profile is sort of what people worry about, I guess.
Yeah. So absolutely, we want to get involved in that sort of space. I think it would really complement the brand and the portfolio for us. But yeah, like I say, it's hard.
I just want to mention we're sort of at the half-hour mark, and we did advertise this as a half-hour session, but if you are both happy to continue, I think we'll go along a little further. Is that fine with both of you?
Sure.
And the other thing is, just to the listeners, if you have any questions, send them through. We might not answer all of them, but we'll do our best. So fire them through. And if you have questions afterwards and you want to email them through, we'll be in touch with Simon and Maria afterwards, so we can pick your brains, if that's okay, not to take up too much of your very valuable time. So fire those through to marketing@unleashed.com, and we'll pick those up. And if you need to go, we will email this session out afterwards to everyone who's registered. So feel free to drop off if you've got things to get on with. But in the meantime, I have questions about contract brewing. Simon, you're doing it.
Yeah.
But are you going to continue doing it?
Yeah, we will. And so I guess contract brewing for brands or breweries like ourselves, I guess it's really good, I guess, tech that if you can turn it on and off as required is, I think, probably the best option. So providing we have space, absolutely, we'll continue doing it. We work with only a select few people that we know and we trust, and so it's good.
When you were talking about the sort of the limitations on your brewing capacity and entering into these kinds of relationships, it's not called contract brewing for nothing, right? I presume you have to be quite careful about detailing everything. I mean, this must be a space that you deal in, Maria?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the setup. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what advice do you have? Because, I mean, I would imagine that moment where Simon decides that he really wants to experiment with an exciting new seltzer. He's heard some good intel from overseas, and it's a pain in the bum that his client is going to use that up, that VAT. He wants to sort of have that for himself. Off he goes to the contract and sees what he's agreed. I mean, do people get into trouble, or not trouble, but into difficult?
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing about contract brewing is, well, I suppose there's two aspects. One is if you're the party who is contracting someone else to make it for you, is making sure that the quality standards of the team who will be manufacturing that product is up to par, and that the quality is what you expect and what you demand. So that's a technical part of the process. But in terms of the business aspects of it, one of the most challenging things, I think, is to find a contract partner who can work with your demand. So a lot of contract brewers, they're going to require that you brew batches that are X number of barrels once a month, or something on a very regular schedule to make it worth their while. Because generally what I see is that the company who is hosting it, who is the brewer, they are offering up to contract brew other people's products because they need some consistent revenue. They're not looking for one-off projects. They're looking for kind of consistent projects that they can depend on. So that can be challenging for the person who needs something contract brewed if the demand isn't quite at the level that the partner requires. So it can be challenging to find the right partner in that regard. And it's just, and the other part of it is that there's a shelf life, so even if I agree to have you brew a very large batch once every 3 months for me, I'm not going to be able to sell all that beer by the time that the shelf life runs out. So it's just this like logistics dance of what do each party need? What are the minimums required? What's the expected shelf life? So just kind of navigating those issues.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to jump on that as well, Maria, because you're 100% right. And the other side of it, the other challenge is when that contract partner, I guess, when their brand starts kicking off and going really well, and they're like, actually, I forecasted 1 brew a month or whatever, but what I really need is 3. And then obviously we've got our own product that unfortunately for us is the priority. So the poor contract brewer in this instance gets very confused as to why their product isn't first cab off the rank sort of thing, and that's the challenge for them. I guess, you know, if you own a brewery, you sort of reserve that right to put your own product first. But it becomes challenge. And the other thing with contract stuff is no matter how much you do the work around who's responsible for what, I guarantee you're going to forget something. So like, you know, freight is a big one. Who's responsible for the freight to get to various places, or bringing ingredients in, or the cost of a pallet, or the cost of pallet wrap. So it's the detail is required is massive to get to a point where both parties are really comfortable and happy with the setup. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably active and ongoing communication, really. No surprises would help a lot.
I do see there's an interesting business model that a couple of my clients have used to get started, which is essentially they come up with their beer recipes and their beer brand, and they just start their company essentially having everything contract brewed. So the only real operations of the company truly is just to function as a marketing arm, because someone else is doing all the manufacturing. And that's a really nice way to prove concept in the market, because you're not tied to having $1 million in equipment, and you can get your product to market and prove that there's a demand for it. So it's a nice way to build a bridge where you can get investors interested, bring them in at a valuation that already contemplates that you're a proven player in the market before you go out and spend a lot of money on your own equipment. So you can actually end up, from my perspective, being in a much better business position, because the valuation is higher when you bring that equity in by going that route.
Interesting. And presumably, there's benefits to both sides, because the larger brewer with all the equipment is, probably wanting, potentially someone in your sort of situation, Simon, is wanting that stable income to make a safe launch into a bigger operation. So they want regularity. There's someone else who, and as long as you're comfortable with giving a leg up to your future competitors, deal with them later, it's tomorrow problem. Then you've got a sort of what's the phrase? Is it cooperate, sort of competition and cooperation at the same time? It's a very interesting model.
Yeah.
Team, I've just got a question in from Joanna Monteith, who says, I'd love to hear any insights on using Unleashed for a brewery. I'm just getting the hard looks from the sales desk over here. Answer the question about using Unleashed. So, with permission, I'll do it in a roundabout way, because we were talking about earlier, promised some cost saving measures. One of those potentially is software. So Maria, do you want to pick that up? And for context, Simon, you're a customer of ours, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So we'll go easy on the hard plug. This is not it's time to sell the product. So yeah, cost saving, Maria, and sort of dealing with those conditions that you're describing at the start of this.
Yeah, so I think the biggest point that I'd like to hammer home is just how important good data is. And, it's not good enough to know what your revenue and your COGS are. And in my opinion, it's not even good enough to know what my draft revenue and draft COGS is, and my package revenue and my package COGS. I really believe that you need to evaluate the profitability of every individual SKU that you have on the shelf. You guys call it SKUs as well, SKU, item number?
Yep.
Yeah. So you really need to know for every individual product that's out there what the profitability is. And the only way that you can get that is by having a sufficient machine or software that can parse that data for you. Because without that, you aren't going to know, which products you're winning or losing with. And for example, and also you need to look at the entire weighted cost, because if you have like a Pilsner, for example, a Pilsner takes is much more expensive than other beers, not because of the cost of the raw ingredients, but it's because of the time that it sits in tanks. So Pilsner might take 2 more weeks to fully ferment than an ale does. And so when you calculate in that cost of time in tanks, you could think that you're making a ton of money on your Pilsner, but if in fact you're not taking into account these elements of overhead, it can be a cloudy picture. So I think it's really important to have very clear data, and that often stems from your software. So that's a big piece on the software. Let's see, I wrote down some other points here. Another thing, and to be fully honest, I'm not sure what the Unleashed capabilities are in this point, but being able to do forecasting, and not only of your sales and your production, but also of your cash flow forecasting. That's incredibly important, and making sure that you've got a good eye to cash at all times. Back to the point that we were talking about earlier with production capacity constraints, if you maximize your production schedule, which is something that a software like Unleashed can help with, you can go much further in your production setup than you think you could. So, for example, just by tightening up the logistics of your supply chain and your production plan, you can really maximize the value of the hardware that's sitting out on the production floor. And you might be able to go a year or 2 more years before you actually have to jump into a larger facility, simply because the system you're using can help you work smarter with the same equipment and just make those turns like clockwork.
Yep.
So those are some points that I think are really important about having a good software.
Right. How are you using Unleashed, Simon?
Yes, we brought on Unleashed in, I think we're about 2 years ago now, so sort of halfway through our sort of journey. So we that first couple of years, you're busy and everything's awesome, but Maria, you sort of touched on it, like just not really knowing good quality information about how particular products are performing. So we integrate Unleashed with Xero, our accounting platform. We also do some Power BI forecasting with Xero and Unleashed through our accounting firm, and it kicks out really awesome cash flow forecasting. The benefit of all this is that I can go to the bank and when I'm looking to buy more tanks or whatever, and I've just got really high quality information that they can make a decision on really quickly and confidently. And so that for us is huge. And I don't know, it seems surprising that we got as far as we did without acting this way. And you got to work like a grown-up business. You can't be just guessing.
Simon, I think that's exactly right. As oftentimes it's not only the benefit for you as the business owner, but it's also the benefit of your stakeholders like your lender. In presenting a picture to the bank of, I'm a responsible business owner, I know what's going on with my numbers, and just proving that you've got the information to back up your assumptions. That goes a huge way towards having a healthy relationship with the lender.
We often, from a marketing point of view, the kinds of customer that use Unleashed that we see coming in, we see there's often the kind that you use it for the fundamentals. They have a business problem, which is they're not tracking their cost of goods sold, or their inventory or the stock taking is a nightmare, and they've been doing things in Excel or pen and paper or whatever it might be, and so they move on to a software. And then later on, and we sort of say things like, "Oh, hey, we have a business intelligence feature here. Did you know that you can measure your, SKU margins by channel? It's all in there. The data's in there. We can just access it for you." And that's a later conversation. And also things like, there's a B2B store, and it's also so that's an efficiency that we offer our customers. And then there's the B2C sort of integrations with things like Shopify that allow people to set up, direct to consumer channels much more easily. And so those are conversations that we have after the fact. And then there's another kind of customer who comes in from the get-go and says, I want to upload my data. It's all in a spreadsheet. Yeah, give me the inventory management. That's a given. But they're almost that they know that they need that data level from the get-go, and that's a much more mature business. And those, I'm guessing a little here, but they tend to be the ones that move quickly because they're in that digital headspace from the get-go. So I hope, Joanna, I hope we answered your question in part. I have no doubt that someone from the sales team will be in contact to answer your questions in more detail. Team, is there anything else that you had on your mind that you wanted to share with our viewers?
Oh, wow.
Opening the floor.
Geez, from an Unleashed perspective, I was going to make a comment before. So we utilize it for obviously inventory management and everything else, and also sales. What has been good for us is the add-ons that have been sort of coming up. And so we've recently brought on the B2B platform, order platform. And that's been awesome. And so the reason that it's been really good for us is that we've had sales reps and customers sort of go back and forth of, hey, what's available, what's coming up, and everything else. And we've eliminated a huge amount of that by giving them the ability to see exactly what's in front of them with both the product range and also, I guess, what the product looks like. So a big thing for us as a brand is making it easier for our customers to order, and that B2B platform is doing that. And I think that's what other brands, if you are watching this, that's the sort of thing that you need to consider is how easy can someone order your beer and then repeat again. So so that's been really good for us.
Taking some of those friction points out of it. Things like stock availability through your sales software is that's a pain in the butt to deal with in person, and it's a lot of time. Like I say, it's a lot of time. We do hear a lot of feedback along. It's not really about replacing functions. It's really just like freeing people up as much as possible to bring their A game to the creativity of running the business and the creativity of making the product and coming up with the ideas, preserving that kind of space, and not spending your time constantly doing what a computer should be doing for you.
Yeah, especially for us, for example, where more than half of our product is special release. And so we were producing catalogs that were out of date as they were coming off the printer, so it was just ridiculous. So
yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I've spotted a problem already.
Exactly, there you go. So that's I think, again, just sort of driving home the point of make it easy for people. We've still got a long way to go in that, and we can improve hugely, but yeah.
Maria, do you have any other insights in terms of, and we'll just stop flogging the software here for a minute, give them a break, in terms of reducing those costs in the business in an environment where we can expect some of the revenue to be stabilizing? Do you have any other sort of top tips for our sort of small to medium Australasian brewers?
Yeah, I would say I wrote down some of these a second ago. Having a respect for the balance sheet and keeping a healthy balance sheet. In the world of your accounting reports, there's three main reports: balance sheet, profit and loss statement, statement of cash flows. And the profit and loss statement is very intuitive. I think most people gravitate towards that because it's simple to understand. You get it, money in, money out. The balance sheet can often be more nebulous and a little more confusing. And while I understand that, honestly, from my perspective, I think that the balance sheet is the most important to look at, because it if you're the balance sheet tells you the health of your organization. So, if you imagine that you were going to stick a thermometer in your business, the balance sheet is that thermometer. It tells you if you're healthy or not. And so if your business is healthy, then you have freedom. You have freedom to try out new products, to make mistakes, to put money towards research and development. But you really, the more that you're tied with debt, then that really hinders your ability to be nimble as a company and to find your path forward. So I would say respecting the balance sheet and committing to a healthy balance sheet is paramount. Also, being able to always have an eye to cash, depending on where you are in your corporate life cycle. You might, as the head of a company, if you're the CEO or the CFO or director of operations, look at cash on a daily basis. It's not too much. It's critically important. And in fact, it's less about the empirical number in terms of dollars that you have in the bank, and it's more about how that cash moves over time. So the benefit of looking at it on a daily basis is that keeps you in tune to the rhythm of the company. And, you will, the closer and more frequently that you look at some of these top line numbers, the more you will intuitively understand how the business is moving on a seasonal basis, and just get a sense of where you are. And then the other thing that is really important, and this is not particularly financial, but keeping up with trends, being able to pivot. We talked about that earlier. And one more thing that I want to mention, especially when a company is in a younger phase of its life cycle, I think it's more important to watch cash flow than it is profitability. So while profitability is critical, you also want to make sure that you have enough lifeblood to keep going to the next day or the next week. So a lot of maybe inexperienced finance people might be chasing, if you buy malt in bulk, you might be able to get a discount on it, but you're having to outlay a large chunk of cash in order to get that discount. And at this phase of your life cycle, would you be better off having that steady cash flow, paying a little bit more for malt, but not running the risk of running short on cash? So I'd say, make sure your cash is squared away first, and then start to hone in on the profitability.
Nice. Just writing this down quietly. I will just throw the floor open quickly. Does anyone have any more questions? And if nothing pops up, I might say some thank yous and goodbyes. It's been really fantastic chatting to you both. Maria, when's you're working on a book at the moment?
Yeah, distillery book. So the distillery book, it's Distillery Finance, and that is being released through the American Distilling Institute. So I have to be finished with the draft by October, end of October. So it'll be on the market next year. But here is, I just happen to have it with me. Small Brewery Finance. Yeah, this is Amazon or the Brewers Association. So, yeah.
Right. Should be on the
Thanks for the plug.
Right, thank you very much, both. Let's just check. No more questions. So thanks for everyone for joining us. We'll email this out as soon as we wrap up the session, or later today, I think. And do come along. There are some more very interesting sessions in the summit series. We've got, I think, a leadership fostering high performance culture from our leadership team coming out shortly. So do jump along to those. And otherwise, thank you very much, both.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
That's right.